Okay, so turning to the next question. So again, the question is coming from the chapter 8 of Vedanta Treatise. We are encouraged to analyze our personality based on our actions and their constituents. Is intention, an underlying desire which supports action, a constituent of action? If so, which constituent does it fall under? Is it correct to think of unselfish desire to help the community as stemming from sattvic knowledge, and selfish desire, intent to be recognized, as stemming from rajasic knowledge? Okay, so again, we are talking here about the section from both chapter 8 of Vedanta Treatise as well as chapter 18 of Bhagavad-Gita. So in there he talks about the constituents of action. There is the knowledge which backs it, there is the actor who performs it, there is the action itself, there is the degree to which we are steadfast in performing it, there is the happiness that arises from it, etc. We have these different constituents of action. And so when we're analyzing our personality, we say, well, what's my knowledge like? What am I like as an actor? What's the quality of my actions, the quality of my happiness, so forth? So the question is saying, is intention one of these constituents of action? And if so, which category does it fall under? So the question also talks about knowledge. So let's start there and then move from there to intention. So knowledge can also be categorized under these three mental temperaments, sattva, rajas, tamas. So the highest quality of knowledge is that which will recognize an underlying unity throughout all of diversity. And it can be phrased in different ways. You see a world full of human beings, and you recognize some are rich, poor, some are intelligent, unintelligent, healthy, unhealthy, moral, amoral, immoral. All of these differences. But for sattvic knowledge, there is also the knowledge that there is something which unites us that transcends the differences, that there is this unyielding platform of unity on which the differences play out. And the things that are different can change, they come and go, but the thing which is always there is this underlying unity. What is that underlying unity? You could phrase it in different ways. We are all human beings. We're all seeking our own satisfaction. We're all seeking our own happiness. This is an underlying unity. We are all conscious creatures. So now you've expanded your circle not just to human beings, but to non-human beings. Every conscious creature moves towards its own well-being and away from suffering. If you're a cow, you do this. If you're a human, you do this. We are all united in that. Rajasic knowledge only sees the differences and the divisions. Yeah, cows are unintelligent creatures. They're different from us. Yes, of course they are. There is the absence of the underlying unity that makes me and the cow the same. So sattvic knowledge sees unity and diversity. It's important that we recognize that sattvic knowledge recognizes where there is natural difference, but it doesn't see only that. It x-rays through that into the more important unity. Rajasic knowledge does not see the underlying unity, that you and I are the same. It only sees where we are different. where we are in opposition to each other, where our interests don't align and does not go beyond that. So when you get into an argument with somebody, a friend, a spouse, a sibling, a parent, a child, what's that argument based in? It's based in rajas. Yes, you have different demands and needs to me. That's the difference, the demarcation. Your needs don't satisfy mine and mine don't satisfy yours. Then we get into conflict. But if we were to recognize, who do I have in front of me? A conscious creature with hopes, dreams, fears, desires, just seeking their own well-being, then immediately I see there is a sameness and there is a softening of that conflict. So when we talk about sattvic knowledge, rajasic knowledge, it's not just stuff that we can talk about, not knowledge in that respect. We're talking about insight. And that insight which fundamentally changes the thing that we are looking at. It changes our perception and it changes our natural responses. Knowledge expresses as attitudes and actions, naturally and spontaneously. If your knowledge is rajasic, it will create those sorts of desires. If I know money makes me happy, that will lead to desire for money. If I know sharing makes me happy, that will lead to a desire for sharing. So when we're talking about knowledge, it's what we see as the truth, whether or not it actually is true. So when we know something or have a value for something, desire is the result of that. So let's go back to the question and have a look. We're encouraged to analyze our personality based on actions and constituents. Is intention a constituent of action? Yes. So the intention is the outcrop, if you like, of our knowledge. It's very much a constituent of an action. Is it correct to think of unselfish desire as stemming from sattvic knowledge and selfish desire from rajasic knowledge? Yes. So the question here is, how is that the case? If you have an unselfish desire to help the community, how does that come from sattvic knowledge?
Because you identify with the larger with a higher ideal, right? I mean, community versus self, versus family versus immediate circle. So your circle of identification is larger.
Why? Why is it larger? How does that? How do you connect that back to knowledge?
Because you see oneness between other human beings and yourself.
Yeah. So when you recognize your own inherent desires, you act to satisfy them, to bring those into completion. When you see yourself reflected in another, you will naturally act to satisfy those desires. Your own interests are of interest to you. When you see another person as having their own interests, they become your interest as well. So you don't see a difference and division there. You understand this person too seeks their own well-being. These human beings, these conscious creatures all seek their own well-being, just as I do. When you see that, you're helpless. There's nothing you can do to not help. Think of a more exaggerated example. You see a person walking along the street and they trip, they fall, and severely hurt their arm or their leg or their ankle, what's your natural response that you can't control? Your natural response is to spring forward. Oh, are you okay? You're not doing it to show off. You're not doing it because you want the person to thank you. You're doing it because you're a human, and because there's a human in front of you. There has been that intimate recognition of sameness. If that was me falling over the curb, in fact, change it. There's been that intimate recognition of sameness. That is me falling over the curb. It's not an elderly lady. It's me, a young man. So I spring forward with that outpouring of help. It's coming from sattvic knowledge. So yes, and that's the question we can ask ourselves in general. If I have the knowledge we are separate, what sort of desires can come from that? What sort of desires cannot come from that? And so too with we are one. If that were true, what sort of desires can come from that? What sort of desires cannot? So unselfish desires or intentions spring from the knowledge of we are one, sattvic knowledge. Selfish desires, which is I want to satisfy my interests and I don't care about yours, can only come from that division and demarcation.
But when you talk about him or her, there would be conflict. Now, again, for people who are married or who have a relationship, there would be many things that you don't want to do it and you're forced to do it. If you don't do it, then the divorce is going to happen or separation is going to happen. And it causes pain for two people. So I think we talk about it simply in this way, but when we are faced with a problem of life or bigger than just simple one that we're discussing now, it does affect the emotions strongly. And you can't say, you take this child, I take this child, you have so much, I have this much, I don't want a child, you want a child. That's going to start a big emotion for both sides. So how can you compromise not to say, I am selfish, I don't want to do this, and you are selfish, you want to do that? I think this is going to be bigger when you're talking between two people who have commitment toward each other.
Yeah. So the way to compromise is to ask the question, what are this person's needs and what can I do to help satisfy them? When you do that, you are tapping into your sattvic knowledge, which is that we are all human beings, flawed, with different needs, just seeking our own well-being. When you see that in another person, you will ask the question, okay, what are this person's needs and how can I help to serve them? That moves you towards compromise, collaboration, cooperation. If that is lacking, then it's as you say, it becomes conflict and each person simply trying to pull into themselves the resources that are shared. So that's why this spiritual path is so vital for the survival of your mental peace, for the survival of your relationships, for the survival of our species. Because if there is simply a resource scramble to try and collect the land, the wealth, the love, the attention, the affection just for me, then it all gets squandered. And collaboration and compromise is hard because we have that rajas, because we have self-interest, because of desire, because of fear of loss, fear of missing out, fear of pain, fear of future suffering. This is the human condition. We're looking to transcend these into something sattvic. And sattva is also the human condition. It's not that we're trying to become superhumans. We're just trying to become better humans. I remember the Swami saying once in class, it's so hard to be good. And it sounds like a very innocuous statement. But the depth of that, it's staggering. And for someone who has reached a high level of spiritual development, that shows their compassion, it shows their sattvic knowledge. Now, for someone who's at a high level of development, it's not hard to be good. But for the rest of us who are still struggling to make our way up that ladder, it is hard to be good.
When you say it's hard to be good, it means not to be good or not to be affected. Because to be good, it means not to have the emotion drawn into you. If a couple loves each other, one loves and the other one doesn't want to stay in the marriage, that causes pain no matter what. I cannot say, because of your satisfaction, tell me what you want and I'll do that. Well, that doesn't work in here. It causes conversation, it causes argument. So the point I want to make it is when you say for the happiness of someone else, and that's compassion, but also you have to know the other person have to decide for himself or herself also. The two people is not only I decide for you, I have to decide for myself also. To stay with whoever I have to stay, whether he's going to benefit or I'm going to benefit. This is going to cause a pain for one side, no matter what. The only way it won't cause pain is the one who have gone to the higher level and says, you know, whatever you want is yours. If you want to separate, if you want to go, if you want to do whatever, you can do that. But if that entanglement is there, and whatever you call it, the love between, or for one person is stronger than the other one, I don't think it can be resolved. Whatever you satisfy, you can do it. That's not going to work.
You're not looking to satisfy whatever the person wants. You're asking yourself what the person's needs are and what role you can play in doing it. You're not trying to make another person satisfied. You're trying to occupy a position where you stay mentally stable and peaceful. You're doing it as a recognition that in order for me to occupy that higher level of my own personality, my interest has to be in serving the other person's well-being. So you're not trying to fix another person's life. You're not trying to make them happy. You're simply trying to act with integrity and keep yourself aloft in a higher way of living. You can't fix the world. You can't make another person happy. But you can keep yourself in your own integrity and your own higher values by placing your attention on the other person's needs. And if they don't receive that, they don't receive it. But the point is that this is the level of our own personalities we should be striving for. It's, as you talked about earlier, it's introverted. I want to help you is extroverted. Okay, any further clarifications there? Okay, so the final question for today. A sattvic actor is free from attachment and acts without attachment to likes and dislikes. Does this mean for an action he does not like, he will do it anyway because it is his obligation, and for an action that he likes, he will not keep on doing it beyond the boundary of his obligation? So short answer here, yes to both. Sattvic actor means it's not coming from likes and dislikes. Well, if it's not being done from likes and dislikes, then where's it coming from? Exactly as the question states. Because it's my obligation. Do I like the action? No, this is an action I dislike. Well, then why are you doing it? Because it's my obligation. We do this every day. If you have ever been a parent, if you are a parent, you'll know all about this. Every day is filled with actions that you'd perhaps prefer not to do. Then why are you doing them? Okay, the sattvic answer, or the ideal answer, is because it is my obligation. I don't like it, but I do it because it's my obligation. Fairly easy to understand. And the second aspect, if it's an action that the person does like, then it's initiated because it's obligation, and it terminates when the obligation is complete. If I take an action beyond necessity, the question is why? Because I wanted to, because I liked it. And we give that same example over and over to help illustrate this. You go to a social event at someone's home, and the host has put their time and effort to create this beautiful dessert. And you're fit and healthy and no problems. And so you take a portion of that dessert as a way of allowing the host's offering to come to completion. Oh, thank you, I'd love a piece of the cake. You eat it, you enjoy it, you like it. It's your obligation to take part. You want a second piece. Is it your obligation to have a second piece? No. You've confirmed the host's desire to be a good host. You've taken part in the communal eating of the dessert. All of your obligations are now discharged. Will you have a second piece? Well, it depends. If the answer to that is no, then it indicates, even though I like the dessert, even though I like eating it, my obligation is done, so I say no thank you. If I say yes, I'll have a second piece, it's because I want a second piece of cake. It's likes and dislikes. So yes, for sattvic action, for sattvic actor, if I like doing it, I'll continue the action until the obligation is complete. And then cease. And what is the poem that we talk about that highlights this idea?
Olive tree.
Exactly. This is exactly what the olive tree talks about. So there were two hermits wanting oil for their lamps. And so the first one took a sapling, put it in the ground, and then asked for rain. Then he asked for sun. Then he asked for frost, and it died. He looks to his friend in another cell and says, "You've got an olive tree. How did this happen?" The second hermit states it beautifully. "I entrusted to its God my little tree. He who made knew what it needed better than a man like me." So now the second hermit didn't do nothing. The second hermit did plant the olive tree, the sapling, and then recognized that was the end of his obligations and left the rest up to nature. This is sattvic action. We do what we ought to do, then we finish, and even if we want to do more, we don't, because we recognize the obligation is complete. Let the action roll on, let the effect come to fruition. Laid I on him no conditions, fixed no ways and means, so I wonder not my olive thriveth, whilst thy olive tree did die. Any further clarifications, questions, or otherwise? Okay, thanks, guys. Happy New Year to everybody.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Glenn.
Glenn. Thank you, Glenn.
We are back for our Sunday morning class. So for those that are joining, I shall see you then. Until then, next time, have a great day, week, month, etc. And I shall see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Happy New
Cheers,
Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.